Christmas. Happy New Year. Happy Hanukkah. Happy everything. Let me just share out the... Let me share this out, and then we will get started. Word. I need to shake my head. I didn't get that. We might, I'm not guaranteeing, we might even do a little bit of gaming at the end of this. Maybe. And my little girl is up here. I used some Gorilla gel and my head's all itchy. Oh, I also went to go see. Nosferatu. It was good. It's not as great as everyone's saying it is. It's really not. It's mostly ripping off both the original Nosferatu, which is supposed to, it's a remake, and it's ripping off a lot of Bram Stoker's Dracula. Not the book Bram Stoker, but the movie by Francis Ford Coppola. That doesn't mean it's bad. I want to be very clear. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's very good, very enjoyable. I'm very glad I watched it. It's maybe like an 8 out of 10 for me, 7 out of 10 for me. What the heck's going on? Why are we not live? To share this stream. Why are we not live? Okay, I'm gonna stop the music. Better not have gotten. I put D. Okay, let's see. Did I get hit with some? There we go. Okay, we are live finally. I was like, that better have been free music. All right, so we're gonna have fun tonight. We got a lot of stuff to get through. We're gonna do a little bit of Dan. A little bit of capturing Christianity. Hi. Hello. And we're going to do a few other things. But first off, Merry Christmas. All right, let's go with Dan first, and then we'll get to the rest.
Just so everyone's clear, Jesus was not a refugee, okay?
All right, let's see it.
From within the Roman Empire to the Roman Empire, okay? Egypt was part of the Roman Empire, right?
Correct, 100% correct.
I just want to make sure we're very technically correct here. It drives me nuts when people say that.
Thanks for clarifying that. I appreciate it,
When I saw that advertisement of He's Gets Us or whatever, and they said Jesus was a refugee too, it's like why we need to have open borders and all this, I cringed. It's biblically illiterate, and it's using left-wing talking points and appropriating them.
So just to be clear, this is entirely wrong. And Charlie Kirk obviously doesn't have the foggiest idea what he's talking about. Jesus was very clearly a refugee, at least according to the way the English word refugee has been used and understood in international law and wider discourse for the last 70 years or so, and as long as we take seriously the account of Jesus' birth in the Gospel of Matthew, which is where we get the angel warning Joseph and Mary to flee, Thevye, according to the modern Greek, or Feuge, according to the Erasmian pronunciation, into Egypt. And that verbal root is where we get the English word refugee. But they would have crossed an international border in order to escape persecution at the hands of the ruler of the nation-state in which Jesus was born. That makes them a refugee. And how do we know that they were crossing an international border? Well, because Judea was not a part of the Roman Empire. That's probably the most catastrophic flaw of Kirk's.
That's interesting. I've often thought about the exact distinction with Judea, because at some point, once it's Palestine, it's most definitely Roman. Um, but while it's a holdout, while it's under the protection of Rome, would you still consider that part of the Roman Empire? Now, I know Dan's not being this nuanced here, but I would. I would consider once you're under the protection of Rome that you're part of the Roman Empire. And that's how we fill out the map and make it all beautiful. Because if we were just to do the provinces that were officially under control, Rome doesn't look as big as it does
presuppositions
in
here.
our imagination.
Judea was an independent and autonomous kingdom ruled over by Herod the Great, whom Rome recognized as a king starting in 37 BCE when they aided Herod in fighting off a Parthian invasion. Rome would not possess Judea until around 6 CE, when they annexed Judea after deposing Herod Archelaus, Herod the Great's son, for his rank incompetence. That is when Judea became a part of the Roman Empire. Prior to that, Judea was a client kingdom, so they were more of a protectorate or a vassal state, just like pre-exilic Israel was to empires like Egypt and Babylon and Assyria. They were an independent nation state that just owed allegiance to a larger dominant sovereign. That was still an international boundary that was recognized by Rome as well as by Judea. So according to the way we understand refugee status today and have for the last 70 years or so, Jesus was absolutely a refugee. Charlie Kirk.
Again, Gavin. Yeah, I'm going to call him Gavin. Gavin McKellen is not nuancing this at all. So I think there is a way to say that he wasn't a refugee in truth, in actuality. But when it comes to travel papers and permission and all of that, yeah, you'd need permission to travel. He didn't have it, so he's a refugee in that sense. But it would kind of be like calling someone a refugee from Puerto Rico, and I would say that doesn't work, because Puerto Rico is technically a part of our country. Now, if you want to say someone's a refugee from Japan while we were in control of Japan, maybe that would make more sense. I just think there's a little bit more nuance here than Dan's playing with. But Charlie Kirk is not using any nuance at all. So
just doesn't like that, because he recognizes that could provide a bit of a complication to his structuring of power and values and boundaries within the context of Christian nationalism. But that's a Charlie Kirk problem. And it's a problem with a lot of folks across the entire spectrum of political belief, because an awful lot of people think the Bible says what they need it to say rather than what it actually says. And I have a forthcoming book on that called The Bible Says So, What We Get.
I mean, if you want me to review your book, Dan, because every time I watch your video, you're advertising, and I assume I'm your only audience member, you could always send me a free copy, and I could review it. And then you could follow up with me if you wanted to and dispute my review and refutation. You could dispute my review. I mean, if you wanted to get a whole 1,000 people to watch the video. That's a lot of people for you. I don't know if you know that, but 1,000 people is a lot of people. And of course, if you're one of my videos that don't hit and the algorithm hates because we say something stupid like a bad word or mention a group that we're not supposed to mention, and we get suppressed or throttled, well, then you get a whole 25 people watching the video. I don't think you can handle that kind of publicity, Dan. I know you're from TikTok world where you think, it's a lot of views, but it's not the same here on YouTube where there's, real people. But I get it. Dan.
Get right and wrong about
Gavin McKellen Ortland.
Scripture's most controversial issues. This comes out on April 29th. There will be hardcover, audiobook.
You should have made it come out on April Fool's Day. Come on. Who's your advertising agent? Who's your agent?
Ebook formats, and you can pre-order now through the link in my link tree if you'd like. And the fit for this video is the Spawn #1 cover.
Okay, Eldano. Let's see what else he's got. There's one of these that was actually really good. Refugee, the Bow Norrican's Christmas tree. We'll go this one, that one, maybe that one, and then we'll move on.
They deck it with silver and gold. They fasten it with hammers. Where mentions, much less condemns, Christmas trees. Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion. And every year around this time of year, I hear from a bunch of people that Jeremiah 10, 3, and 4 condemn Christmas trees as divine images or as idols. Here's the text of Jeremiah. It says, "For the customs of the peoples are false. A tree from the forest is cut down and worked with an axe by the hands of an artisan. They deck it with silver and gold. They fasten it with hammers and nails so that it cannot move." And in the minds of people who do not understand anything about how divine images were constructed or enlivened in the ancient world, this sounds an awful lot like somebody just cut down a tree, decorated it with tinsel, and put it in a tree stand. And that has absolutely nothing to do with what's going on here, because people are ignoring the working it with an axe. This is where people whittle it down to whatever shape they want, which is usually the shape of some kind of anthropomorphic or non-anthropomorphic divine image, because the wood was usually the interior, and then it would be overlaid with precious metals like gold and silver. In fact, in Akkadian, there's a specific kind of tree that is referred to as the bone of the gods, because it was used in the interior of their divine images. So what is being envisioned by the author of Jeremiah 10 here is not a tree with branches and leaves. It is a chunk of wood that has been formed into the interior of a divine image, and it is nailed down so it doesn't topple over. This is a part of what are called...
Okay, I don't have anything to say on this one. Let's go on to the next one. Dan's got pretty much all of that correct. Let's try this one. Are these the origins of Christmas? Let's see. Wait.
I'm going to give you guys 5 Christmas traditions that have insane origins.
All right, let's see it.
Number 1 is the Christmas tree. The pagans saw evergreen trees as fertility symbols. They decorated them with carvings of pagan gods and put sweets, nuts, things like that onto the tree as offerings to the gods. And to top their trees off, they put 8-pointed stars to attract Ishtar, the goddess of fertility. They loved their tree.
That one, that's the everything but the last part there. She's okay. But no, there's no Ishtar. At least not in that context. So, what Dan's not going to... Really? Down. What Dan's not going to mention is that a lot of these myths are coming from a few different places, such as the Witch's Magical Handbook, the Witch's Bible, and a few other stuff that'd be from Crowley and Gardner, and even a little bit LaVey. And what you do is you have these people who are doing LSD, who are trying to take advantage of suckers, and they invent these histories of Christianity because there's no one to check. This is the 20s, the 40s, the 50s, and they're speculating, and the speculative self-help, I guess, spirituality ends up in academic material and ends up in books and movies. And once it's in a movie, the academic material doesn't really matter. But once it's in a movie, it then gets repeated over and over again like it's true. Because Americans, as a group, we're kind of stupid. And we end up watching, we end up believing whatever we see in a movie, and we think it's true. We think it's real history.
So much that they gathered around them and sang songs to them.
So while pre-Christian European people...
And if it's a documentary, even more so.
Groups absolutely saw evergreens as symbolic of fertility and life, and sometimes incorporated them into festivals and celebrations that took place outdoors. They weren't connected with Ishtar in any way, shape, or form whatsoever, or with offerings. And there is nothing that connects those celebrations with the development of the Christmas tree, which is brought indoors and incorporated into indoor celebration.
Also, if you go and you look at the Catholic mythos around how we adopted some of these traditions from, let's call them pagan, but in actuality, just the larger cultures. We do Christianize things, so that lends to this credibility. But the stories within the lives of saints, for instance, that tell how these things were done are very truncated, and they're full of a lot of common popular myth and not so much the actual history. Just to let you know.
This is a uniquely Christian innovation that took place in the Upper Rhine region in the 14 and 1500s. And if you'd like a wonderful discussion of the evidence for the origins of the Christmas tree and why it is a uniquely Christian innovation, you can check out Religion for Breakfast's wonderful video on this from last year.
Religion for Breakfast is really good. Jimmy Akin has some amazing stuff on this. Who else? There's a few other ones that I would recommend. Matt Whitman, I think, had one. And I want to say someone else, but I can't think of it.
Next up, we have Gingerbread Men. Gingerbread Men originated from the Saturnalia festival.
I'd never heard this theory before, by the way. The thing about the Christmas trees I've heard. I've never heard this one. So this was an interesting take, and I was like, is there any substance to that? And according to Dan, there's not, but we'll get into that.
They would make little ginger biscuits shaped like men, and they would all eat them right before they did ritual sacrifices.
This is laughably false. Not a word of this is true. We do have evidence of
Which explains why I'd never heard this before in anything that I've read or anything that. But that's interesting. Still interesting.
Being used in bread back in like 3rd millennium BCE Greece, but we don't have gingerbread as we know it today being baked and made into different kinds of shapes and incorporated into celebrations and festivals until around medieval Europe and probably a little later, the 15th, 16th centuries. And there is a legend that the gingerbread man originates with Queen Elizabeth I, who used to have them made and decorated to resemble visiting dignitaries. That's just a legend, but we don't have any evidence of any such practice predating that time period. So it definitely doesn't go back to Roman Saturnalia.
Number 3, the pagans believed that Odin,
Now, I've heard this before. I've debunked this on my channel before. But I love the way she put it together, because the way she put it together was very interesting. It's very comic bookish, the way she did it. But we'll get
sun god, came down from Asgard once a year and visited them.
And there's a bigger problem with this whole video, but Dan will address that at the end. But it's a problem of misinformation. And I don't like labeling misinformation as misinformation. I think you should just let people figure it out on their own. But I do think there's a problem here because there are people who will take these kind of factoids and never double check them and will just assume what they heard for the first time, even if they forget where they heard it, even if they forget that it was a joke. So I'm kind of showing my hand here. They will run with it. So this could ruin a lot of people's lives in the long run.
Through their fireplaces. He would catch a ride on his 8-legged horse. That's why there was originally 8 reindeer before they added Rudolph.
So again, this is a couple of actual facts mixed with a bunch of pure and utter nonsense. Odin was not the sun god, Odin was the sky god. They did ride an 8-legged horse named Sleipnir through the sky, according to some traditions, but this was associated with the wild hunt.
If you're watching at all, it's such a weird word. If you're reading at all Silent Night and Silent Night Returns, from DC Comics, which is Batman and Santa Claus team up, 2-parter, 2 different years in a row. If you're reading it, I recommend go watch Comic Pop because they actually are talking about it right now in their latest video. You will see that they talk about the Wild Hunt and they do try to clause up the history of Santa. Clausing up Santa and making him a Viking character doesn't make a lot of sense because Santa's actually based on a real person, Saint Nick, who's like a real dude. Doesn't matter that the Santa Claus fantasy myth, I don't know what to call it. The fictional Santa Claus is basically now completely separated out from the original Saint Nick due to advertising and Coca-Cola. But if you were to look at it, it still doesn't make sense. You're using a real person, might as well reference the real person's history. I mean, that's what they did with Dracula, and they made it way better.
That's why that picture shows hunting dogs and him holding up a spear. This is something that could take place around the winter solstice, but also on stormy nights. Has nothing to do with fireplaces. And there's no connection between Sleipnir and Santa's 8 reindeer because Santa did not originally have 8 reindeer.
I wonder how much Dan knows about Krampus.
Originally, Santa had 0 reindeer. Then Santa had 1 reindeer. Then Santa had 8 reindeer. If we go back to Washington Irving's early 19th...
You forgot when he had 7.
19th century book, A Knickerbocker's History of New York, he describes Santa riding a wagon over the trees and the rooftops. No reference to any animal pulling it. However, St. Nicholas, the bishop, traditionally rode a horse along the ground. And then we have an 1821 poem that is anonymous that was published in a children's magazine called Old Santa Claus with Much Delight, which includes an illustration showing Santa riding a sleigh pulled by a single reindeer. And then 2 years later, we have Clement Clarke Moore's famous poem, A Visit from St. Nicholas, which we know today as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, where Santa rides a sleigh pulled by 8 reindeer. So no, Santa's 8 reindeer.
How in the world an obscure saint ends up becoming the prototype for Santa Claus, I still don't get that.
Have nothing to do with Sleipnir or with Odin.
Which leads us into number
This saint may or may not have punched a heretic in the face. Let's turn him into a cartoon character that gives presents to kids around the world. What?
4, pagans would leave out milk and pastries for Odin, and the children would leave snacks for his 8-legged horse in their boot by the fireplace. If you left out tasty enough treats for Odin and his horse, he would leave small gifts in the boot. And that's how we got our stocking.
This is all made up because we don't really have any idea how the practice of leaving out stockings by the fireplace for Santa originated. But the fact that people historically hung stockings by fireplaces to dry them almost certainly has a role to play. But anyone who tells you it came from this specifically is just making it up.
And the last one is absolutely insane. So pagans thought that mistletoes represented Saturn, and they also saw it as the ultimate fertility tool around this time of year. So they would throw giant parties, get really, really drunk, hang one of these up, and then get down in an attempt to create as many as possible.
So again, this is just pure and utter nonsense. The earliest association we have of mistletoe with Christmas and Christianity comes in medieval Europe, as so many of these symbols do, when they would hang it over doors to symbolize peace and goodwill around Christmas time. And many Christians saw the white berries as symbolic of the purity of the Virgin Mary and the evergreen leaves as symbolic of eternal life. And this could have association with Norse traditions that associate mistletoe with Balder, who could only be hurt by the mistletoe plant, and so in one tradition was killed by a spear constructed out of mistletoe. And then his...
So update on my skateboarding. I'm able now to squat all the way down while skateboarding, although sometimes my ass is a little bit high up. I need to squat it lower. I am able to jump on and off and do a switch on the skateboard. I still can't pop an ollie. Mind you, I've only been skateboarding consistently now for a month. It should have been more. I had it, but I had to go 6 weeks. After I had been skateboarding for a month, I then broke my toe. So I wasn't able to skateboard for a while. I didn't break it because of skateboarding. Broke it for a different reason. And I was late for work, ran my foot into a 45-pound dumbbell. Anyway, so I can also, I'm working on my ollies. Working on my, what do they call it? It's not TikToking, tap-talk? I don't know, whatever it's called. Tic-tac-toeing. And I'm working on one other thing. So that's what I'm working on right now. We'll see how long it takes me.
Mother said instead of associating this plant with death, she wanted to associate it with life and goodwill, which aligns with the way medieval Christians.
But just to be clear, we don't know how much of those myths when it comes to the Norse mythology, although someone tried to correct me on saying Norse, but I don't remember their correction. Is that you got to also think that this is all reinterpreted through a bishop or through a few bishops who reinterpreted the Norse myths into writing. So we don't know how much of that is Christians projecting back Christian imagery into the pagan religion of Norse mythology,
used
or
the
to the
plant.
pagan
So
world of Norse mythology.
that symbol could have some relationship to pre-Christian European traditions, but we don't know for sure.
Disclaimer, I am not judging whatsoever. Don't be mad at me. I wasn't the one that took the pagan traditions. I'm just the messenger. This is satire for entertainment purposes only.
So I think the most accurate thing said in this entire video was that thing toward the end about all of this being a joke. But I want to close with 2 thoughts. The first one is that I see an awful lot of...
Well, the problem is that these jokes get taken seriously and then get repeated as truth, and then nobody knows that it was a joke. Or they think that they're just saying that as cover, and therefore they think they were telling the real truth, but they were it's too controversial to say. But it's never too controversial to say. So yeah, it's crap, and this is a bad thing to do. Dan's
People who
right.
seem to imagine that they're critiquing Christianity by accusing Christians of having stolen everything from paganism, but in so doing, they so frequently frame pagans as perpetually trying to kill and sacrifice anything and anyone they can get their hands.
Which he's about to make a point that I make a lot on this channel. A lot of the things that you think about paganism, like them being super liberal with their sexuality or them eating babies, that's propaganda from the Christians against the pagans. That's not what the pagans actually did. And the pagans used the exact same type of propaganda against the Christians. So unless you want to say that the early Christians also did cannibalism, you're going to have to understand that this is hyperbole and propaganda against the other side, no matter who's saying it. And that you have to really confirm the bodies before you start saying things like that. Or you get the situation like what happened in Canada with those mass graves that weren't mass graves at all. So you got a lot going on here, and Dan's very right to be saying, like, you got to stop repeating this stuff because you're just confusing the you-know-what out of people.
Hands on or have sex with anything and anyone they can get their hands on. And they don't seem to be aware that all this is doing is perpetuating the anti-pagan propaganda that early Christians used to try to demonize the pre-Christian people groups that they were trying to convert. And the second thing I want to point out is that Christmas is and always has been practiced in a wide variety of different and ever-changing ways in the many different Christian societies around the world. And that is going to continue to be the case. And when we see similarities,
Dan the man. All right, let's do this one just a little bit, and then we'll jump into some other stuff.
To index.
Atheism has to be one of the most, if not the most, foolish religions in the world.
Hey, Kevin Bertuzzi has a follower.
All right, let's see.
Already there's atheists who are wanting to write, it's not a religion, it's the belief in no religion. No, that is not true. Atheism, by definition, is a belief that there is no God. It is not the absence of belief in a God. It is the active belief that there is no God.
So
this pedanticness is going to get countered with pedantism. Because Dan is this exact same kid 30 years later.
While I would agree that that last definition best aligns with the majority usage of the concept of atheism in the modern world, that doesn't remotely render it a religion. And also, this is an appeal to definition fallacy, because it's trying to say that...
I really hate that Dan hates definitions. It's one of the stupidest things that he argues. Because he has to use words that we all agree on the definition of to be able to communicate. So just by the mere fact that he's talking and communicating undercuts his point.
Because we can define atheism as X, it cannot be defined as Y, as if definitions could be exclusive or prescriptive or authoritative. They are none of those things. They follow after usage and describe usage, because usage is the only real authority here. So atheism is whatever people use the concept to index or refer to. And people use it in a variety of different ways, which is why there are a variety of different definitions of atheism. But just like religion, atheism is not an actual sui generis category that exists out there in the world. It's something that is created within and does not exist apart from our discourse. So really the only productive way to define it would be discursively. And you can see this article by Koku von Stuckrad for discussion of discursive conceptualizations of religion. I'd also recommend this article by Jonathan Jong on not defining non-religion. And if you would like further discussion on atheism, particularly in the ancient world, I would recommend Tim Whitmarsh's book, Battling the Gods. And then I've also got a chapter from my doctoral dissertation that I pulled out of the dissertation so that I could publish it independently on the development of the concept of religion and why it's problematic.
Does somebody else own his dissertation? That's interesting.
To try to define it today, and you can find that through the link tree in my bio.
Which is absolutely foolish. In Psalm 14 in the Bible, it says that the fool says in his heart, there is no God.
And Psalm 137 says, blessed is the one who grabs and smashes your children against the rock. Just because it's in the Bible doesn't make it true. But
and you call yourself a Christian, Dan.
Also, Psalm 14 as well as Psalm 53 are not about atheism. Ein Elohim is not a declaration of the philosophical non-existence of any and all deities. It's a declaration of the non-relevance of the God of Israel. That's what the concern is. People are not seeking out God. People don't care about God. It's not about existence. It's about relevance. This is not an argument. This is just cheerleading.
In Proverbs
No, that's not cheerleading. This is cheerleading. Go team, go. Go team, go. That's cheerleading. I'm just saying, Dan, if you're gonna be this pedantic, you gotta at least be correct.
9:10, it says, "Fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom."
And Proverbs 23:14 says you should beat your children with a rod so that you save
You heard it here, guys. Dan's pro beating. Get out your whipping sticks.
their lives from Sheol. Again, just because it's in the Bible doesn't necessarily mean it's true. And if
Or you're wrong, and the Bible's correct. Or he was trying to teach a lesson about discipline, and you're over-literalizing it to a guy who misunderstands it, and you're both missing the point. Because the point about discipline still holds, even if the method of the discipline has evolved, and we've learned more about human psychology since then, so discipline doesn't have to be corporal. It can take different, methods. Oh, that would take nuance, which apparently Dan's not doing today.
if your argument only works for those who presuppose the inerrancy, the historicity, the univocality, and or the inspiration of the Bible, then your argument does not work for anyone who does not.
Those two
If you don't believe in monkeys or apes, and you say that evolutionarily, we're descendant, apes and monkeys and people are descended from the same type of ape. Yeah, that doesn't work either. But it doesn't mean it's not true, because evolution is definitely 100% true. So, who cares about the naysayers?
things line up well. Because the one who is an atheist, he doesn't fear God. He hates God desperately.
You're confusing anti-theist with atheist, and you're confusing a type of anti-theist with all anti-theist. So you don't know enough to be talking like you're talking about what you're talking about, because you don't know anything about what thing you're talking about.
He hates God and doesn't want him to exist.
Atheism. Oh, hold on. Atheism, the shelf. Yeah, you need to read about atheism first before you make these kind of declarative statements. Because even if you follow all the philosophical statements properly, you'll get a bunch of internet atheists who don't understand what they believe, or that what they don't believe, and they don't understand the definitions or accept the definitions that are used in said literature. So you really need a foundation before you start making claims like that. Because I got news for you. Most atheists are very moral people who have objective reality as one of their goals. So you don't know what you're talking about. Juan Santiago, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Happy Hanukkah, Feliz Navidad. Many other languages that I don't know.
This is laughably false and very obviously not based on any data or any serious engagement with arguments about atheism. This is just a rationalization that has been...
No. He's repeating a thing that he heard someone else say. He either heard it be effectively done by people like Jay Dyer and who's someone else is good at this one? Sam Shamoon. Or it's something that he's heard done passively by his pastor or by his parents, and he's now just regurgitating it. Which, considering the state of American high schools, I'm assuming this kid's like high school, college age, assuming the state of American high schools, I'm very surprised that he would have a super strong pro-Christian stance and a super strong anti-atheist stance. Most students are tending toward the secular, so maybe he's a bit of an outsider, and so he's over-vocalizing. He might even be like in Cade stage Calvinism. Most other branches of Christianity don't go down that route, but
been ginned up in an effort to try to disincentivize people from taking atheism
they can't.
seriously. In other words, this is rhetorical prophylaxis for theism.
Typically, the reason for that, typically the reason that the atheist rejects God is because the atheist is doing something that the atheist knows is absolutely morally disgusting or is in support of
Wrong.
something that is absolutely morally disgusting, and they don't want to be held accountable for that which they're actively partaking in.
Sounds like a cage stage Calvinist.
Same type of rhetorical prophylaxis that's not based on any data whatsoever. It's just another attempt to try to disincentivize people from taking
Or it could be from some street etymology that's out there.
atheism seriously by suggesting that not only are atheists hateful and stupid, they're also morally disgusting. So you don't even have to pretend.
That's why I only date atheists. I mean, if you want to have a good time, date an atheist. You know what I mean? This is so stupid. So anyone who doesn't know themselves is not going to have a really strong understanding of their own morality. So when atheists make fun of Christians, but the only Christians they're referencing are people they knew in their teenage years and childhood years, and then when Christians are making fun of atheists, but the only atheists they knew is from the same period, you're talking about two opposite groups that don't understand morality, ethics, don't even have a frontal lobe yet. So when you're arguing about, oh, the shitty things that the Christians did or the shitty things that the atheists did, but you're only talking about people you knew in your teenage years because you don't associate with the other group anymore as an adult, you have a lot of blind spots and you don't have an integrated or well-rounded understanding of the other point of view or the other type of person. And it turns out that the other person is going to be a person just like you and have the same instincts just like you and the same survival drives just like you and the same pleasure-seeking drives just like you. So while there might be some personality differences and some history differences that will make you very different people, morality is not one of those things.
And to listen to them, you can just stay safe inside this warm blanket of theism.
But for anyone to actually try to make the claim that they don't believe in God is pretty absurd for a few reasons. First and foremost, the Bible is absolutely objectively truth. It is.
Loving it. Loving it. Thank you, Frank Turek. Thank you, James White. I appreciate that you brought this person into the world. Santiago, your thing got yeeted, but let me read the version that I keep. I think you can make a case that modern atheists are atheists because they reject the idea of a hierarchy. I don't know.
Amazing. It is impossible that the Bible exists. And yet it does.
Yeah, but there's so much I can make fun of about the Book of Mormon that I wouldn't laugh at this assumption of this poor assumption by a uninformed, cage-staged early Christian apologist. I know, it's bad. But I wouldn't laugh at him. At least not yet.
Look, I'm not an atheist in any way, shape, or form whatsoever, but the notion that the Bible is objectively truth and is impossible is just laughably stupid rhetoric. Like,
No. There's something about Jedi and us thinking things were going to be better under Disney. I don't have the right framing or wording for it right now, but whatever that was going to be related to this. Have you seen? Yes, I have. I just finished watching part 2. It was. Well, I'm gonna say two things about it, Santiago. Well, San Sosa's San Swan Sunas, whatever. Swan's refutation of Gavin Ortland's attempt to get rid of canonicity and say that the Bible is still infallible and incorruptible and all the other great ints that the Protestants like to use. I don't think they use inevitable, but infallible, incorruptible, all that kind of stuff. The Swan's takedown was extremely boring. Like watching paint dry boring. I think I agree with almost all of his points. Maybe there's like 2 or 3 that I didn't. But like, let's say 90% of his points I agreed with. But only like 1 or 2 of them were relevant to what Gavin was saying. Everything else was just kind of informational. Oh yeah. I mean, that's exactly, Santiago. You're texting exactly what I'm saying. Even fast forward, and I mean actual fast forward. I didn't just do 2.5. I was at 1.5 at one point. Even fast forward, it was painful to get through. I don't think Gavin Ortland's going to watch it. I love Swan, but someone needs to go through and find all of his bullet points. Not the end summary, because the end summary is good, but it also rambles. Go through the bullet points and re-edit all of his stuff down. Like a 2-hour video of his can be edited down to 15 minutes. And he would suddenly become the most effective apologist on YouTube because all of his stuff is tight. But man, is he boring to listen to. But anyway, like I said, I agreed about 90% of what he said. I just thought it was slightly ineffective and sometimes irrelevant to Gavin's point.
That is the most pathetic cheerleading for the Bible I've heard in a long, long time.
Again, Dan, why are you lying? This is the most pathetic cheerleading you ever heard for the Bible. Go Bible. Go, go, go Bible. Go Bible. Go, go, go Bible. Bible, Bible, go, go. Bible, Bible, go, go. Solomon, go, go. David, go, go. Jesus. Revelations. That's the most pathetic cheerleading you've ever heard of the Bible. Dan. And you call yourself a biblical scholar.
We'll get into more videos on that. But Romans chapter 1, verse 18, it tells us that every single person knows that God exists, but we suppress
Santiago, that is the most truthful thing I've heard on the internet all day today. Swan Sosa, whatever. Sona, right? Suna? He gives context to the context to the context of the context. Like it just never ends.
the truth in unrighteousness.
And in Romans 1, Paul's natural theology rhetoric is just his own rationalization for why he should be able to condemn the Greco-Roman.
Or it's the writer's explanation of what he projected Paul's explanation to be based on the developed theology, based on the influence of the Greek world, which is being influenced by the pre-Israelic, pre-Hebrewic Semitic people that would become them, who were on the ships of the sea people. I brought it around. You thought I was going to get lost in there because I went somewhere that I shouldn't have gone? No, I found a way to brought it back, man.
World for not appropriately worshiping a God they don't believe in. Again, just because the Bible says it doesn't make it true.
Meaning it is out of our sinfulness, it is out of our hatred towards God, that we actually deceive ourselves to the level that we actually do believe that there is no God. We make ourselves...
I'm not going to make the joke.
completely
It's
foolish
Christmas
by
and I'm Catholic. I'm not going to make the joke.
our sinfulness, by our ignorance, to the point that we literally start to pretend that there is no God. That is absolutely absurd. That is ridiculous.
What is absurd and ridiculous is the notion that you would expect anyone who does not already presuppose the inerrancy of the Bible to take seriously an argument that first requires...
I haven't seen his shirt yet. Is the Frog and Toad one the one with the cartoon where they would like drive a little buggy? It was a really boring cartoon that sometimes was on HBO, and I hated the books. Is that the one? Not that you would know that I hate the books, but I hated the books. Is that the one? Is that what you're wearing right now, Dan? Are you wearing a shirt that promotes a cartoon that I hated in the 1980s? Is that what's happening, Dan? Dan? I'm not kidding about me hating that cartoon, by the way. It was the most boring thing I've ever seen. And I hated the books, too. I don't know if it is, because I thought that they wore like a little hat. Did they wear a little hat? If anybody knows what I'm talking about.
You presuppose the inerrancy of the Bible. But I know that's not what you're actually trying to do. You're not actually trying to convince anyone who doesn't already agree with you. You're just trying to make folks...
No doubt. I'm actively trying to convince you to become a Catholic. It's just going to be a long, long road.
Who already agree with you feel like they're right. Again, you're just cheerleading.
Dan's a Mormon. Let me read Santiago's longer comment. The only good that comes from it is that it shows that Gavin is dishonest with his citations at best, or he is lying at worst. I don't agree. And here's why I don't agree. I've watched some of his longer long form unedited lives. I think he had like 2 live streams where he actually just read the stuff. It might have been a video, but I think it was a live stream. And he interprets it in a weird way that I would never interpret what he was reading. And he interpreted it in an anti-Catholic way, and he interpreted it saying the opposite of what it said. And I did a response video to it back when I was doing response videos. And I simply read the text. I read the further context, like a little bit above and a little bit below. And I was like, it doesn't say that. It's saying the opposite of what you're saying it says. So based on that, I don't think it's dishonesty. I think he honestly is reading it that way. It might be his biases influencing his interpretation. I'm not sure. A lot of people, Santiago, try to get Dan on that, and I haven't seen him take the bait. Or if he has taken the bait, he's taken those videos down or did it on TikTok.
See, if you look at the world, it is truly impossible to try to pretend that there's no such thing as God. Literally every aspect of the world is proof that there is a God. Literally every single part is proof that there is a God, that there is a creator.
All right, this is getting too asinine. The fit for this video has been Frog and Toad.
It is. It is. You dare, on my channel, bring Frog and Toad on the screen? You think you're just going to get away with this? You think this is something you can just do on my channel, Dan? You know, it's times like these that I question not only his scholarship, but even his degrees. Like I don't even think you should. If you're wearing that, I don't know if I trust your education. I want to stay moderated. I want to stay moderated. I want to stay moderated. I cannot say what I want to say about that shirt. Let's continue on. Michael Beverly has a video. We might do like 5 minutes of it in a little bit. I want to go to the base camp, then we'll go to Michael, then we'll go to the other video that I was going to do, and that'll be the rest of the night.
And he talked before this in a bit I cut out about how previous people acted like, hello, Simone, I'm excited to be here with you today.
You don't want to do that, Josie. I plan to stay.
Hello, Simone, I'm excited to be here with you today. Today, we are going to be doing an episode where we continue exploring how did Christianity outcompete other religious cultures and grow as fast as it did. This is going to build on another podcast that we did on this subject, but it's totally okay to watch as a standalone. The subjects that we're going to
He recently showed a quote from Augustine. I can't see how he got Sola Scriptura from it. No, that's what I'm talking about, Santiago. Like, I think we're back on the same page. He will read something and he'll say, see, and I'm like, see what? That you should agree with me? And that you're wrong? Like, it's the weirdest thing. So I don't think, maybe he has bad reading comprehension. I don't know. But I don't think it's dishonesty. I think there's something else going on there. Like I said, it might be some kind of weird bias because of how committed he is to Protestantism, or he just doesn't know how to read properly. I hate saying that because it sounds like such a diss, and I don't mean that as an insult. I love Gavin. Like Gavin's like literally my favorite Protestant, but at least on YouTube. So like, I don't understand how he's interpreting what he's reading. If you watch Laden Flowers with How to Be Christian, and they're talking about eat my flesh and drink my blood and eat my flesh. It kind of feels like the same thing that's happening with Layden, because like he's literally pointing at the thing that tells him that he's wrong. Truly, truly, I say to you, and he's still somehow not getting it. Layden Flowers? No, he's an anti-Calvinist Protestant who's actually a really nice guy, but he's terrible at debates. That has nothing to do with his faith or him getting to heaven. Just he's not good at debates.
Focused on most here are the topic of martyrs as a conversion mechanism, plagues, and did Christianity actually have a more moral system than the systems it was competing against in the mind of the average person? In the last time,
oh, Gavin. I don't know what Gavin has a degree in. I just assume Bible or apologetics or something.
went on this. I mean, certainly when you look at the exposure of babies being a common thing, when we mentioned that some famous Roman philosophers complained about how, and saw it as one of the evils of the Jewish people, that they tried to get people to not drown their babies because they're like, you shouldn't expose or kill newborns, and they're like, no, what? That's such a Jewish. What a Jewish and nefarious. Which is one.
A long leisurely journey during which local Christians came out to meet him all along the route, which passed through many of the more important sites of Antioch. Ignatius was condemned to death as a Christian, but instead of being executed in Antioch, he was
so
sent
anyway, the thing that I like about this one, well, maybe we might do this video later this week. I'll keep it on my watch later. Is Christianity might have won out simply because they were having more kids, having more sex, and having more kids, and within a tight monogamous family, as opposed to what was going on with Romans because they weren't having as many kids. Apparently, I don't know. Something to think about. Contraception backfired on them. Okay, let's get to. Was it this one? Oh, I don't remember. Was it that? Or is it, we do some Majesty of Reason in a little bit. Let's go to this one first, then we go to Majesty of Reason. But Majesty of Reason will just take up the rest of the freaking video, though. So I don't want to, but I think we're going to have to. Let me get to Watch Later. Let me go to the Watch Later. Hold on. Let's do this. Nosferatu. Yes, I'm watching all that for a different thing on a different channel. This one looked really interesting to me. We might do this also this week. Voice of Reason explaining to... I always think it's a fake voice. Explaining to Ruslan, the Virgin Mary, which Ruslan should know. He's just plain stupid. Tough questions for Protestants. The Michael guy. Michael Lawton? I love Authentic Observer, but every time I watch one of her videos on this channel, my subscription count gets injured. I love her. I wish I could do videos on her, but nobody else wants to watch anything she does, which is weird because she has 12,000 views on this video. My audience and her audience are not related to each other in any kind of way. They're on opposite sides. Like like how in cafeterias, like in high school, like there's like the cool kid table and the uncool kid table. This is like a different section. Like there's like one's in a glassed off section, the other one's in the pit. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's how my school was set up. Animal suffering. Noah's Ark. I still want to do that one. Okay. Give me a 1 for Majesty of Reason, doing countering Capturing Christianity. Give me a 2 for Capturing Christianity's comment on the Stuart Cliff debate with Alex. And give me a 3 for the beat with Alan Parr. Hold on. Give me a second. Let me sign in. Yes. What's going on? Hello. Why are you doing that? Hey, sign in. I want to be able to chat. Yeah. Worky little thing. There you go. Let's make a poll. Start a poll. Okay. I don't even remember what number 2 was. Number 2 was what was number 2, guys? I forgot what number 2 was. It wasn't Capturing Christianity, right? It was the other one. I literally forgot what I said. So Alan Parr is gone. I think it was this one, right? Was it this one? We're going to do this one.
I view that this is the best explanation. You have not said, no, you can't say that's the best because this is.
I'm not like, we're not best friends, but I know what he's aware of. I know the arguments and why he's presenting sort of what he is presenting in different contexts and stuff. And
by the way, just the opening is the definition of grift. But anyway.
Yo, in this video, we are reviewing.
Even Randall Rouser is calling him out, and he still doesn't get that he's the bad guy in this situation.
The recent debate that took place between Alex O'Connor and Stuart and Cliff Netschel. That's what I'm going with. David, I know that you made a video with how do I pronounce it? I know that you were kind of playing around with it. Do you actually know the way to pronounce his name?
Yeah, it's apparently Connectly. Connectly.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying too. I've been saying Connectly also.
And it's interesting because I hadn't heard of him until recently. Like his clips are apparently he took off on TikTok and got way more popular. But anyway, I started hearing about him like a couple of months ago. People were like, hey, why don't you review this by Cliff? And then I would see the name, but I had no idea how to pronounce it. But yeah, I looked it up for that video because I didn't know how to pronounce it. And I clicked on the PBD podcast where I'm assuming he pronounced it correctly. But turns out a ton of people know who this guy is because he's been doing it forever. Like I heard from people who are like, oh, I knew that guy from like the 1970s when he was on my campus. So he's been doing this since like the 70s and 80s and stuff like that. Going on a campus having the discussion. So he's one of the OGs. He's one of the OGs of this approach. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, he does come across as more of a preacher, less of a philosopher. And so that's, I mean, a lot of people in the comments, because the way that we've titled this is like this, from my perspective, and I think Than is going to comment on this as well. David, this is your first watch through of the debate itself, actually, and we're going to get some thoughts from you live. But to me, I mean, because I know so much about Alex, I've interacted with him one-on-one, like he's been in my house. Like I know Alex. I'm not like, we're not best friends, but I know what he's aware of. I know the arguments and why he's presenting sort of what he is presenting.
You know, I really like David Wood. I used him a lot when I was reading the Quran. I was trying to get like 4 different perspectives. This was a lot of research. I had a lot of extra time. I had a lot more money than I have now. And what I would do is I would take one pro-Islam side, one anti-Islam side, one imam from Sufi, and one Islam imam from whatever the other one's called. I can't remember right now. And what I would do is then I would take their opinions and I would use that to help me figure out what I was reading and watching.
In different contexts and stuff. And to me, I think he could have presented a much more philosophically robust case. And so to me, there were some pretty embarrassing moments in this debate from my perspective.
I have to say, I find that tough to believe.
It is. Yeah, no, I get that. I get that.
No, I'm saying
Alex is.
You know, a lot of atheists that are watching my video are upset, thinking that I'm attacking the atheist side. It's like, no, everyone did terrible. The only one who did even semi-decent was the only one who did semi-decent was Alex. Like that's it. He's the only one, and even he did a bad job. He fumbled and had a hard time recovering. I think where he messed up, I think what messed him up is that he gave the positive Catholic argument for doctrine and dogma over self interpretation of the Bible, which has nothing to do with the topic at hand, by the way, because they were talking about the existence of God. And then when he realized that he gave a Catholic argument, because he used to be Catholic, I didn't know that till recently, till like this year or last year. But when he realized he had given the Catholic argument, he was then trying to backpedal his way out of it, which was kind of cool. But it didn't help him at all. So like I said, everyone had a bad showing. The guy who did the best in the debate was Alex, but it doesn't mean anything because none of them gave a positive or negative argument for the existence of God. Santiago says the only thing about Wood is that he takes the more literalist approach to the Quran. I don't know, but for my understanding, there was many schools of thought. Yeah, there are many, many schools of thought in Islam. What David Wood is doing is he's pointing out the most ridiculous. He's doing exactly what atheists do with the Bible to the Quran. And he's doing it unmercifully. But for those who want to call David Wood Islamophobic for doing so, you then have to call yourselves Christophobic for going after Christianity in the same way. So if you don't have a problem when you do it to the Bible, you cannot have a problem when David Wood does it to the Quran. That's not my approach to the Quran. I took it very seriously. I took it very sensitively. I, in the end, did not like what the Quran was saying. I did not agree with it. But that's that. I'm not gonna crap on it because I still think it was worth reading, and I think everyone else should read it too.
People brought up the debate a couple days ago when me and AP were live because they wanted us to respond to the first question of
is AP about to become a Christian? I really feel like that's about to happen.
Q&A once they start taking Q&A from the chat. That's the only thing I actually watch because
and I don't mean just because he's talking to David Wood, but he's doing a show with David Wood and his wife is already converted, and that's kind of a lot of pressure for a guy. If your best friend or online best friend, your homie you ride with every single day, and your wife are both Christians, and they're both talking apologetics to you. They're not just, being Christians worshiping. They're like actively like giving you arguments. I don't know. That's a lot of pressure to be under. So if he's not becoming a Christian, that's weird that he would submit himself to that.
Asked us to check it out. So I scrolled through and got to the first question and so on. But I said at some point, if I had to predict, if you're talking about like sit down formal debate, I would say Alex would have to have a much better advantage because he's been doing it for a long time. And Cliff connected.
And we're going to skip the portion when Cameron starts playing his own videos. We don't give a shit about that at all.
If they were on a college campus with students yelling stuff, I would go with Cliff because that's what he does.
So the question is not who won. Okay, so I think in terms of rhetoric and stuff, Alex probably had the upper hand. I think Cliff, people were giving him like a really rough time. He's not a philosopher. Like he's obviously not a philosopher. Okay, you watch this debate, you know that he's like there's a lot of opportunity for him to grow in that area. But he nevertheless like made some decent points, and there were some points where Alex just had like a really, I think, a bad response in response to Cliff's like not too challenging of a question, and so that I think is also kind of embarrassing, given how smart Alex is. And Cliff even points that out in this debate. Cliff is like, "Look, Alex, I know you're a smart guy. Like they've interacted before as well. Like everyone knows. If you watch Alex, especially someone like me who's been one-on-one with Alex, like I know how smart the guy is. But the fact that he like couldn't
humble brag much,
give like good responses, and we are going to cover that. We're going to play a bunch of clips today for you guys, so you can.
They don't play that many clips. It's mostly Cameron filleting himself. Merry Christmas, B.S. Lewis. Oh, that wasn't a proper response. Hold on. Merry Christmas, B.S. Lewis. I really like your content.
For yourself whether or not you think it was.
I love you, brother. I gave you a special shout out on my Christmas message, by the way. I hope you took it to heart because I really do mean it. I'm really appreciative of you and of you pointing out, especially back when we were debating, gaps in my logic and things that I hadn't thought about or hadn't addressed. So I really do appreciate you, man. That's real. That's 100% real.
Quote unquote embarrassing or not. But I mean, ultimately, like, even if you don't think or agree with me that it was embarrassing on Alex's part, I think it was nevertheless really disappointing. Yes. Really disappointing.
By the way, there's clippable material of me earlier in this video, dude, where I am cheerleading Christianity in response to Dan McKellen calling someone a cheerleader for Christianity.
Disappointing. And I'll explain, like, there's very little chance that you're going to disagree with that conclusion.
Now,
I think at the end of this.
Preemptively, let me ask preemptively this question. You're pointing out that Cliff is not a philosopher, and Alex knows he's not a philosopher. So if you're
Cliff's arguments were embarrassing. Stewart's arguments were bad. Like, Stewart does not belong on the main stage yet. I get that they're father and son, but he doesn't belong up there. But Cliff's arguments were horrendous. At one point, he was arguing against traditional Christian interpretation. If you don't have traditional Christian interpretation, all you have is secular scholarship. Like, I don't even know where you would go without traditional Orthodox understanding of the Bible. And then he tried to invent a new cosmology at the very end of the debate when he got caught in a trap that he himself laid for Alex. He got caught in his own trap and he couldn't get out. And he just starts inventing his own cosmology. It was terrible. It wasn't D'Souza bad. Like, there's not enough there for us to like be like, it's over for him. But I mean, it was not a good showing. He was way too emotional, and it just wasn't a good showing for Cliff. Stewart should not be on any of these things. That he needs to stop riding along with his dad. At least on camera, be off camera, and learn how to do this from the way his dad does it. And Phil, his arguments were not interesting to me at all. I think the guy who did the best was Alex, but like I said, he floundered and flubbed up a little bit. So,
if you're basically saying he's not giving philosophically, talking about Alex, he's not giving philosophically rigorous responses. How much of that is him?
But I think David Wu was about to say it, but then Cameron interrupts. I think the reason why Alex was giving bad arguments is not because Alex doesn't know the material. It's because he hasn't had to deal with this level of bullshit in a really long time. He's been talking to Jordan Peterson and other much higher bullshitters, if you know what I'm saying. Like, people who understand the material way better on a way deeper level. He's been dealing with them. He's dealing with William Lane Craig. He's been dealing with Jordan Peterson. He's dealing with Richard Dawkins. And now he's talking to Cliff. And Cliff is he's just not on that level, man. It was not good.
He's making claims.
Sort of not trying to make philosophically rigorous claims because he's
It's not just that, David. It's not just that, at least in my estimation. I think Alex actually gave some arguments that had philosophical mistakes in them because... And he was able to get away with those mistakes.
Yes.
To know that he made those mistakes.
Again, the way that I put it in my review is that he's running old scripts that he hasn't used in a long time. These are old word tracks that he knows works against people who are doing what Cliff is doing. And when you don't practice your word tracks, they get rusty and you kind of mix them up a little bit. When I was selling and I do cold calls, I would listen not only to my own calls, but to the word track. I'd listen to it before I'd actually say it. And then I'd get into it. Even though I knew it, even though I did it every single day, 100 times a day, I would still practice and listen to it. I feel like Alex has been dealing with such bigger minds and such bigger complications that he hasn't had to use these word tracks in a long time, and he was rusty at them, so he was getting them wrong. That's what I think was happening. I don't think they were philosophical mistakes. I think he was just out of practice for this level of intellectual debate, because it just wasn't very intellectual. It was very street level. It was very, what do you know about the Bible without actually knowing any of the history kind of stuff. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. It was street preacher level. It wasn't deep academia and scholarship.
In those arguments, right? But he got away with them because he was talking to somebody like Cliff. That's not to demean Cliff. It's just like we said, Cliff is not a philosopher.
Yeah. No, demean Cliff. He should not be on the stage with Alex. It was a fucking disaster. There goes my monetization, but it was a disaster.
Pointing to see somebody like Alex, who knows better, make some of these mistakes. And the specifics we'll point out later, I'm assuming. So I'm not going to go into any examples right now.
We'll play the clips, and you guys can see it for yourself.
Wait, so is it more along the lines, because if you're saying that Alex should or does know better than what, in other words, he's giving an argument or giving a response that he knows is defective, but he's presenting it because he knows he's talking to someone who might not be aware of the problem. In which case, it would be kind of like the Dawa guys who would back in the day would argue perfect preservation of the Quran, but then once it had been exposed, then they won't try use it against anyone who knows about the history of the Quran. But when they're talking to someone who knows absolutely nothing about anything, then they'll, but did you know the Quran's been perfectly preserved? And they'll use it if they're talking to someone who doesn't know how to respond to it. And
I think unfortunately that is the situation. Unfortunately, and I've got some receipts for this as well. So like we're going to get to that as well.
No, you don't. You never get to them. You never show them. If you have them, you never showed them.
I published a video about 2 years ago outlining like
I don't care. Let's fast forward that. I don't care about you blowing yourself.
And he's good at debate. Like he knows what.
Thomas goes, it was a fun disaster. It was a disaster that was fun to watch. Oh, yeah. I literally was like, who's Hitch? Yeah, Christopher Hitchens. Yeah. No. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. The problem is Cameron's just really up his own ass. I don't get it. I don't understand. This guy was so likable 2 years ago. I don't understand why he's so far up his own ass. It's terrible. And he doesn't get it. But David Wood is making fun of him throughout this entire video. He keeps on shitting on Bayes' analysis and talking about how Bayesian analysis is the worst thing ever. And Cameron just doesn't fucking get it. I've already cussed, so I might as well just cuss because monetization doesn't come back once it's gone.
But is going to work against his debate opponent in this case. And he knows that he can make a claim that he's made in the past.
And also, I think that's why my videos have been getting throttled. Although freaking Big John cusses all the time and his stuff gets promoted, so who knows?
And it's not really going to be, challenged that hard. And so he knows he's going to get away with it. So it's a really good debate tactic.
Yeah.
Honest truth, I kind of want to get one of my Intro to Phil books and just do like a 3-week course teaching apologists how to not do fallacies, but no one would watch it because my channel's severely underwatched. So
two things. One, there's a question from there's a super chat from Madison.
I cannot do the video comparing the SBL with the Ignatius because I'm not going to get it until February the 25th. So I might have to order it from a different website. I ordered it from Amazon, and I ordered it before it was released. But it says it's not going to come out. I'm not going to get it until the 25th of February, I want to say. It's really disappointing. Like, I'm really upset about that. Because I had a whole series planned for y'all. Let me see. Yeah, February the 5th. So, I don't know. I might order it from a different website later on this month. Or if I see it in a store, just buy it in the store and cancel my online order.
Which is, should I watch this stream or IP and God Logic stream? I would say this stream, obviously.
BS, I don't know if you know this, but you're not really an atheist. It's just a demon inside of you tempting you and making you lie to yourself. Like that? You want me to do that?
Because it's got us. But no, I would say it kind of depends on what you're more interested in right now, because they're going to be talking about Islam and we're going to be talking about atheism and so on. The other issue.
Hold on, let me just make sure that I'm not monetized before I show this. Fuck. Okay, so is this the demon that's haunting you? Is this the demon that's haunting you, BS? You can tell me. You can be honest. This is called Dawn. Is she the person that's haunting you? Or is it this one? You be honest.
little side issue, because you're talking about Alex being a good debater and so on. He also has the added advantage, apart from his intelligence and so on, and his debate experience, also has the added advantage of having the intelligent British accent.
I watched Nosferatu, and I am not kidding. At one point, I thought Holt was actually taking inspiration for his character from Alex O'Connor. Like, he acted and looked like Alex O'Connor.
Oh, you're gonna upset all his fans now. People always get mad at me when I bring that up.
Yeah, guys, I don't know what other people in the world hear, but there's a really smart sounding British accent to where there's like Richard Dawkins.
So hold on, because this is bullshit what he's saying, but there is some truth to it. So if some people do just in America, especially, do just get turned on by a British accent and think that it sounds smarter, but it's also enunciation. So when I speak like this, my videos generally do better because I'm pronouncing every single word, and I'm being careful not to have little missteps when I'm speaking. But the problem is that this is not entertaining for a live stream, and it's definitely not natural. I have to think about what I'm saying before I'm speaking. I'm not just letting it flow.
Douglas
very
Murray.
posh.
Yeah, Alex here.
Very polished.
But you can say anything, and you sound.
And you can also, if you lower your voice just a little bit. I used to do like vocal exercises. I don't do them anymore. I should. It made all my videos sound better. But if you do some vocal exercises before you do your video, before you do your live stream, you'll sound a million times better. Also, if you drink a ton of water, don't drink soda. Drink water or some warm tea, and you'll have a different voice than your normal voice. And it sounds amazing.
Sound more intelligent. So it amplifies whatever you're saying. It makes it sound more intelligent. And that as opposed to, then you have kind of neutral British accents, and then you have British accents that sound real stupid. You got like the, yo, because I was going down here, that we hear from like the Dawa guys. And then like Cockney, and then whatever Russell Brand is, like, oh, the imperialistic dogma now society is. And it's like, you sound like a freaking idiot. Even if you're saying something that is the smartest thing that anyone has ever said, you sound stupid. I guess it's like, I don't think we have a super intelligent sounding American accent. And we got dumb sounding American accents. Like if you go like my hillbilly cousin.
What are you talking about? Well, I guess I was going to say Peterson, but he's not American, is he? He's Canadian. So his accent is extremely intelligent sounding.
Yeah.
Did Karen Bertuzzi just say that Kermit the Frog is the smartest sounding accent in America? A show made for 3-year-olds is the smartest accent? Ay, brother.
I have to say though, it's not nearly as intelligent sounding as the intelligent sounding British accent. I say compared to other North American accents. It would be, what?
I'm joking. I don't think his.
No, you're not joking. You're just a jackass.
His accent sounds intelligent at all.
Well, I mean, compared to my hillbilly cousins, he does.
You have a pretty good Peterson impersonation, don't you? Or is that AP?
AP is actually better. I'm shocked. I did not think of AP as an impression guy, but if he practices for a while, he can actually get good at some certain impressions.
Off topic, but did you see Oompaville? No, I can't really do it. I'm just trying to read out the super chat. Oompaville react to the Wes Huff Billy Carson debate. Do you guys know who Oompaville is?
No.
He cooked Billy so many being reached from God using Wes. Yeah, Wes is awesome. Pray for him though. Right now he's trying to finish his PhD. So all of this is sort of giving him a distraction from finishing his PhD. So everyone watching this.
For the world, I was able to debunk Wes Huff. I'm just saying.
Say some prayers for Wes so that he can finish his PhD and officially become Dr. Wesley Huff. So, all right, let's.
I don't know if you watched his personal story that he made. Congratulations to him, by the way. He got his, his gold or silver or platinum freaking YouTube thing, which means he's going to have a lot more money, which means he might not keep pursuing his degree, but I hope he does. But he was really grateful, and he was talking about how he was doing YouTube, and he was also like being a delivery guy. Like it was actually very humbling and a very motivational story. Except that he already had like a ton of followers, so like him acting like he wasn't about to pop off, like he was already boiling. He was already starting to simmer, and then he started boiling. So like it's really awesome. Congratulations, man. Boil over more.
Let's go now to our first clip. This one is from the opening statement. from Alex, and this is where he lays out his version of the problem of evil. This clip is about a minute.
I just want to be really clear that, hold on, let me move the, Alex was giving the best arguments for most of this. This guy was giving outdated arguments. It's not that they weren't interesting or good. It's just that there's stuff that have already been argued and debunked. Cliff was just somewhere else. I don't even know what he was doing. Stewart is unprepared, not ready, doesn't have the information, doesn't have facts. I think it would have been much more interesting to have Alex and Cliff be the two guys arguing and only be the two guys arguing. I think that would have been more interesting.
A little over a minute long. And this one kind of sets up, I think, the tone for the whole video, for at least from Alex's side.
Who's this guy with him? Phil who?
This is, I think it's his son, Stuart. I mean, they have the same last name.
I know who Stuart is. I mean, Phil, this Phil guy.
Phil, he is Skydive Phil. He's a longtime like atheist blogger. He's got his own YouTube channel. He's got.
Is he an actual skydiver or something? Is that what you call him?
Yes, he does skydive. He does skydive. Apparently, he even talked about that in this debate. So, yeah, he does do some skydiving. But he's interviewed. I'm blanking on their names, but pretty much all of the top atheists, like scientists, who have been talking about religion lately. He's pretty much interviewed them, I think even in person, to make videos on the fine-tuning argument, the Kalam and stuff. So he's very active in this, and I think he's going to start to gain a little bit more popularity as a result. Not necessarily as a result of this debate alone, but he does seem to be pretty active right now. So I'm not focusing too much on him in this review, just because I mean I think he said a lot of false things, but that's not really my focus. My focus here is on Alex, mainly because, and I didn't mention this, and I should, mainly because my
honest truth, Thomas, that's very true.
Expectation.
If I smoke a cigar and drink some whiskey or vodka, my voice gets a little bit deeper. And I sound a little too serious, to be honest about it. But I like it. I like the way it sounds.
Of Alex are so high. Part of that, again, is because I've met him in person. I know how smart he is. But also, I think he's very open in a way that a lot of other atheists online, other atheist content creators are not.
Cameron, yeah, fuck. He's not going to become a Christian, at least not anytime soon. Him being smart doesn't mean gullible and doesn't mean that he's going to throw away his lack of faith. A, financially, that'd be fucking stupid. He would lose his entire audience and support. B, he doesn't believe in a God. He studied all the stuff. He studied more than you. He knows more than you, and he still doesn't believe in a God. So stop saying, oh, he's so smart. Why doesn't he just get it? You sound ridiculous, man. He doesn't agree with you. That doesn't make him an idiot, and that doesn't make you an idiot. But you doing this is stupid. Stop talking as if, oh, if you're so intelligent, you should just get it by now. The majority, in fact, Stewart brings up the worst fucking poll I've ever heard. The majority of people in all fields that require a degree don't believe in God. The less your education is, the more likely you are to believe in God. That was once reversed, but currently, modern age, since the Enlightenment, the more educated you are, the less likely you are to believe in God.
I think Alex is genuinely open to being wrong, to advancing in his philosophical thinking, and so it's really disappointing to me when I see him making these claims. Even if I'm wrong in the things that I've said in response to Alex, like at least say something or like acknowledge it, or I don't know. Yeah. And maybe I'm thinking too highly of myself here, but the points.
Understatement of the year
that I'm making are pretty standard responses. Like there are theodicies.
Do you not hear yourself? I mean, he's interacted with me, but my answers are pretty standard responses. Yeah, that's the problem. I'm reporting what's in books. Do you know why people don't watch me more often? Because they can just go read the book. You're not saying anything original, dude. The reason why your channel started falling in views is because you're just saying what people can go look up. You're not adding anything. you're not adding anything to the conversation. You're just another voice. And I know that hurts me to say that, but I'm telling you, that's your problem. You're not highfalutin. You're not a barrier. You're not a hurdle. No one's looking you at a challenge.
These animal soul building theodicies, there are theodicies in the literature on animal suffering, and Alex is just not interacting with them. So, all right.
You're the third Jackson brother, okay? You're not Michael. You're not Tito. You're number 3. You're not the lead of New Edition, okay? You're number 3, man.
Let's play this first.
You're
clip.
not Casey or JoJo. You're the and. You're not salt or pepper. You're the and. You're the N. You're Spinderella, man. That's who you are.
I'll also remind the audience really quickly that David's PhD is in the problem of evil, if you guys didn't know that. So David's going to have, I'm sure, a lot of thoughts on this. But let's start with this first clip.
Nice. Not only this, but Phil's already mentioned the problem of animal suffering. It's worth reflecting that the problem of evil has a number of well thought out responses called theodicies.
I really don't like that people keep conflating the problem of evil with the problem of suffering. They're two separate problems. They're two separate problems. They're related problems, but they're separate. You have to stop doing the shorthand, and you have to explain why suffering is evil.
Evil exists because of higher order goods that can only be obtainable if there's some kind of suffering in the world. Free will.
That's a bad argument, bad definition.
Means that we need to be able to commit free evil acts. Evil helps our souls to develop and grow closer to God. This kind of stuff. Please keep in mind that none of them.
The actual standard argument, which Alex knows, which is just what Cameron was trying to point out, is that evil is the absence of good. That's the argument. So I don't even know what Alex is trying to do or what he's trying to plant into this conversation with this. He knows better than to give this argument. I can only think that because he had already interacted with Cliff and Stuart earlier in the week or earlier in the month, that he kind of knew where they were going to go, and so he was trying to address their specific take on this. But that might be giving him too much credit. He might have been pressure under Phil, or pressure under Modern Day Debate to give a certain specific take on the argument. I don't know.
Are effective in explaining the existence of non-human animal suffering. Animals do.
Okay, I'm pausing it there because this is the claim that he makes, right? None of the theodicies that exist right now are effective at explaining non-human suffering, animal suffering. And he knows there are these theodicies exist. Okay,
So I'm not worried about the theodicy aspect here, although B.S. Lewis does have an interesting take on that. I am more interested in the fact that he's acting as if he hasn't been in debates he's already been in. And he's acting like as if he hasn't come to conclusions he's already publicly stated. Like he's already moved away from veganism. So I don't know if it's because Phil's also a vegan that they just maybe they wrote it together. Maybe they teamed up together to like support each other's side. But this has nothing to do with whether or not the biblical God exists. And David Wood is the only guy on this panel to point this out. The biblical God and suffering, they're not incompatible. Okay, there's sacrifices of animals. There's animal suffering. There's kill every animal. It's already in the Bible. So this doesn't disprove the biblical God because that's literally describing the biblical God. That's describing the God of the Bible. Now you can say that Cliff and Stuart, by adding in the medieval developments of the understanding of God, omnipotence, omnipresence, omnibenevolence, by adding in these medieval accretions, as Gavin would say. I hate that word, but I'm probably going to use it forever now, thanks to Gavin. But that, you could say, okay, so this disproves the God of classic theology, but it doesn't disprove the God of the Bible. So, and the question is the God of the Bible real? Does he exist? That's the question. So this whole framework and whole exercise is pointless because he's just describing the God of the Bible. Whether or not you like what the God of the Bible does or not, that doesn't change that. Okay, so if you agree with Alex, you still have the God of the Bible. That doesn't change anything. That just means that the God of classical theology or the specific understanding of God that Cliff and Stuart have is wrong. By the way, I lean more toward classical theism. I lean more toward the developed understanding of God that comes out of the church fathers and comes out of classical theology than I do with what you can get from a plain and simple reading of the Bible if you switch all the Bibles out into separate books and they're no longer connected. I'd rather go with classical theology. But I believe the Bible influences, well, the Bible influences the Bible, first off. And then the Bible influences the church fathers. The church fathers influence the medievals, and the medievals develop with the development of theology, develop classical theology. So that's where I stand with my beliefs on that. Just FYI.
And I don't know that we need to necessarily run through them. We can, if we need to, we can kind of explain some of these if you guys want us to. They exist. And Alex needs to acknowledge that. Like he needs to, I think, publicly acknowledge the fact that there
Yeah, he doesn't have to do shit. You need to publicly acknowledge that you're being a grifter and that you got to stop doing that.
are theodicies that exist that philosophers have been working on. And a theodicy, if you don't know, we've been using this word a lot. If you don't know what a theodicy is.
You have to tell Randall Rouse, you have to apologize to Randall Rouser and tell him that you're wrong. You need to apologize to Majesty of Reason for some reason. And I think you need to jump off the internet for like 2 years, maybe 3. Honest truth. I mean this for real. I'm not saying this like, oh, you shouldn't be on the internet. No, share your views. I think you need to go to a monastery or to a retreat where you're not around apologists. I think the thing that's hurting you the most is that you surround yourself with apologists who are salesmen and bullshit artists. You need to go to a monastery for like 3 months to a year, 2 years, 3 years max, and just pray and study the Word of God without thinking of philosophical and theological arguments. Just listen to what it's saying and listen to what the church fathers, read a ton of the church fathers, read whatever saint you decide to delve into, read their interpretation of the Bible, read their commentary, and then come back out and then start again, start afresh. I really do think you need that, man. You need to get away from apologists and start getting around true religious people who aren't trying to proselytize and who aren't doing this for a living or for money, but people who have thrown away money, people who have said, no, I'm going to reject money and I'm going to choose God over money. I'm going to take a vow of poverty. I'm going to take a vow of chastity, whatever. And just go be a good Christian and be charitable and do good works and then come back and then preach and proselytize, because you were a baby Protestant and then you became a baby Catholic and you have a huge platform, but you don't actually know anything.
It's just a reason that God has for allowing the suffering in the world. And this is a particular type of suffering that he's focusing on. He and Phil in this debate are focusing on animal suffering. So they want to say, animals, when you talk about free will doesn't explain why animals suffer because they don't have free will, right? They're not rational creatures.
Okay, I put a goal up. I'm trying to make money. I'm not a grifter. I'm being really upfront. I need money. I am broke. I put up a goal to get 1 super chat, okay? And we'll go an extra 30 minutes. If we don't get the super chat, we're going to end at the 2-hour mark like you normally end, okay? I don't need the extra 30 minutes. I need to go work out. So I'm okay with not getting it, but I'm letting you know I am going to start trying to do the YouTube thing, because I need to be profitable at some point. I got to be able to pay bills.
They don't have the ability to choose.
I'm not hat in hand, by the way. I got a job. I have a house. I have more than one source of income right now, but I want to move on to a better job, and better meaning better paying. And I also want to go back to school. Both those things take a little bit of leverage, and I don't have any leverage right now.
Choose between good or bad because they're not rational. They're not conscious. They're unaware of what's going on. So they want to say that those theodicies that people typically appeal to, someone like Cliff, someone like Stewart, they're going to appeal to free will to explain why they're suffering in the world.
Based on what Phil says throughout this conversation, I don't know if that's true. I don't think Phil has a good understanding of free will. And I definitely don't think he can argue against determinism. Based on his performance here, he doesn't know the argument.
And they want to say, well, it doesn't explain animal suffering. It's just a plain fact that it is false, that there are no theodicies that are effective at explaining non-human suffering. You might think that they don't work or something along those lines.
I don't even think Alex said there was no theodicies that explained anything. He just said that Cliff's theodicy, I don't even know if he used the word theodicy at this point. You've said it so often that I've forgotten. But he was just saying that Cliff's argument doesn't answer it. Cliff's stance, Cliff's point of view doesn't answer it. And that it's controversial to say that animals have a soul in Christianity. And that's true. It is controversial. I believe animals have souls. And a lot of people do, thanks to Jimmy Akin. Jimmy Akin's been banging the drum on this. But if you go back just 30 years, most apologists said, no, animals don't have souls. You go back into the church fathers, there's some church fathers that are iffy on it. Yeah, you have later saints who are definitely pro-animal soul, but you have plenty of them who don't know or think it doesn't matter. There's actually a whole theory that they have spirits, but the spirits dissipate and they don't survive into the afterlife. Then there's the rational versus irrational soul. And then there's people like Kierkegaard who are, even though they're heretics, absolutely do not think animals have souls. So what you're doing here is incredibly dishonest. You, Cameron, are being dishonest. Alex isn't being dishonest. You're being dishonest.
But at least acknowledge them, at least interact with them.
By the way, if you look at his face, David Wood knows that he's being dishonest, that Cameron's being dishonest, and he just doesn't call him on it.
Something like at least name it and say, well, okay, that doesn't work for this reason. I can continue this clip here, but do you guys have any other thoughts before we continue?
No, the one thing I'll just add on really quick here, just in case there's any lack of clarity here. Alex is, in this case, making a really strong claim that none of these can even begin to explain animal suffering. It's not the case that he said, these are attempts and I think they fail. He said straight out, they do not explain.
No, he said they're not effective. They're not effective at explaining.
Okay.
No, he did say they're not effective at explaining non-human suffering.
Yeah, then I would like to hear why.
Yeah, I would say on kind of a surface level, if you're taking sort of the surface level theodicies and so on, you can see why he's pointing. And I'm saying this because as someone who's debated, sometimes you toss out an objection, and you're basically giving your opponent the opportunity to respond to it and to say no, these theodicies can't explain this. But so for anyone who isn't familiar with what's going on here, so you have theodicies, and I think Alex just mentioned free will theodicies and soul building. There are dozens of theodicies. These are explanations for why God might allow reasons for God to allow various kinds of natural evil in the world. And what Alex is pointing out there is that some of the most common theodicies, like God respects our free will, but therefore must also give us the ability to misuse our free will. Alex is saying, in effect, what's that got to do with animals? Why would that have something to do with animals? And then soul building, that because human beings go through different kinds of struggles, we can develop.
And soul building is pretty much denied in the Latin West, but in Greek Orthodoxy, it's like the norm. The norm is to understand soul building, because your goal is theosis. So your goal is to build up your soul, to perfect your soul, really. So it can be one with God, because you're trying to become God, not become a God, but become God, like become one with God.
Virtues like courage and so on, and therefore it's ultimately good for us. You go through bad things, but it's for a good purpose. And he's saying, what does that have to do with it?
Also, if you're watching Redeem Zoomer or looking at his stuff, look at his denial of heaven stuff recently, and you'll understand how a lot of the Protestant and entertainment television version of heaven that's out there is not traditional Christianity. Redeemed Zoomer has a much closer understanding to the actual traditional understanding of heaven, although he's still wrong because the way we use the word colloquially, there's definitely a heaven we're going to. There's definitely a promise of heaven or promise of treasures in heaven. So he's still not right, but he's more right than most of the Protestants who are talking about it.
William Rowe gave the most famous example of a deer who gets horribly burned in a forest fire, something like this, and suffers for a few days. Nothing good ever comes out of that. And so he's basically saying, hey, the standard theodicies that people give, they don't apply to this other category of animal suffering. And then sounds like Cameron is saying, actually, there are theodicies. And you could even apply the theodicies that he mentioned in a way that they have something to say about animal suffering. But
the free will theodicy can be extended to include animal suffering. So can the soul building theodicy.
Yeah.
These are not new moves. These are.
That's what I wanted. The last thing I wanted to say is which is just Alex has gone into the literature about animal suffering to the point that, and I would agree with him, the people that deny that animals suffer in any kind of meaningful sense, I would agree with Alex that that's false. The problem is when you look at that literature, on top of that, you also find that animals can have the capacity, not to the extent humans can, but they have the capacity to reflect and find meaning in their lives. They have purpose in their lives. But I don't know how you can say that and then also say something like the saint-making theodicy.
I've seen a cat struggle with free will. I've seen a cat actually know what the right thing to do is, and you can physically see them trying to choose between what they're supposed to do and what they want to do. They have very small brains. So when people say there is no free will, I'm like, whatever, dude. And when people say that animals don't have souls or don't have rationality, you're wrong. They do. They definitely have spirits. Whether or not they have souls that survive after death, we don't know. But at least rational spirit, they definitely do. They do have a spirit of rationalism to them to different degrees. And animals can definitely emote and have feelings and suffer and feel pain. So if you're someone who's in the Kierkegaard school who doesn't think that animals have emotions, you're just wrong. Animals are very much alive. And they're very much sentient.
Odyssey doesn't apply to animals.
Yeah, there's a 2014 book on animal suffering from Trent Doherty. Again, that's been out since 2014, and
yeah.
I'm pretty sure I remember pointing it out to Alex. I've mentioned it on numerous occasions. A lot of people don't think that it works, but again, it exists. Like, acknowledge it, interact with it, give some sort of reason to think that the theodicy fails. And we're not hearing any of that. And what he says here, Cliff and Stewart, these guys are preachers. They're not going to know about these theodicies or different ways that these very highfalutin philosophers have tried to.
Did you hear that? Look, hear this again. Like, every time I hear this, I just want to. Again, I want to stay at least somewhat montage. So let's just say there's an action I want to take.
Says here, Cliff and Stewart.
I'll put it this way: I would love to slap him. Okay. Every time he says this, I would love to slap these words out of his mouth. This is so insulting to the audience.
These guys are preachers. They're not going to know about these theodicies or different ways.
These guys are preachers. They're not going to know about these theodicies. What the hell, dude? Cliff went to seminary. Cliff every freaking week is supposedly on college arguing with the brightest minds of our future about all of these topics. He's familiar with very street level, guerrilla style apologetics and polemics. He's good at this stuff. He should be on the balls of his feet, ready to say this, ready to answer this. The fact that he's not is not he's just a regular guy. He's just a preacher. Cliff is a freaking millionaire who has a #1 YouTube channel, who has been doing apologetics on this level since the 70s. You're full of crap, man. Your side lost. That's it. That's all there is to it. And the fact that Cliff is your side when you're supposed to be a Catholic is really telling. It's really telling. Not all monotheists are on your side. Not all theists are on your side. Not all deists are on your side. And there's even a portion of Catholicism that isn't actually Catholic. Crows and ravens, according to Thomas, are very soulish. No, crows are amazing. They mourn. They have funerals. I was watching that. Like, wow.
Ways that, you know, these really highfalutin philosophers have tried to extend the.
They make friends and make enemies with other animals and other species and can remember them. Yeah, that's really good. I don't know if you saw the thing about how monkeys in the wild will take dogs as pets to protect themselves, so they can sleep and a dog can be their lookouts. Yeah, so people are stupid that when they think that animals aren't capable of things. They think they're rational. They're not as rational as a human, and they're more in touch with their instincts. But if you think you're not running on instinct, think again.
Theodicies to actually still take care of animal suffering, like these guys, and Alex knows this.
Poor impulse control is an amazing problem that most humans have.
Alex knows that Cliff is just a regular dude. Like he's a pastor. He's not a philosopher. And
he's a pastor. He's not a regular dude. He's a millionaire. He's not a regular dude. What the hell, man? He's YouTube famous. He's not a regular dude. Like, what are you talking about?
This is what was embarrassing to me when I was.
You know, Joel Osteen, that regular dude. You know, Elon Musk, that regular dude. What the fuck, man?
When I was hearing Alex explain this, is that it's just, it's just bad. But let's continue this clip. We got another 30 seconds on it, and then we'll get some more comments.
By the way, every time I say the F word, the official view count goes down by 1. That's not a joke. That's real. I think we got 7 people here, and right now it's only showing 1.
Do not make free moral decisions. They do not have moral souls that can develop through strife. It's controversial even to suggest that they'll simply be compensated in some kind of fluffy afterlife.
Yeah, I'm gonna talk about that part in just a minute, because in the video that I mentioned earlier, this response that I made is 40-minute response.
Go 10 more minutes, guys.
2 years ago. We're gonna watch an argument that I gave.
You want me to go an extra 30 minutes?
In that video, which gives an argument for animal immortality in the afterlife. Again, this stuff exists. You can go interact with it if you want to, but to say that it's like, you know, super controversial without interacting with any of the arguments for it, it's just, I don't like it.
I want to hear today a direct answer. How can the suffering of a deer on its own in a forest, with its leg broken and trapped under a tree, already starving in confused agony, before being predated upon by having a mountain lion clasp the deer's windpipe in its jaw for an excruciating minutes-long death, be explained if supervised by an omnipotent invigilator who, if for some reason could not prevent this particular event, seemingly could have at least designed the machinery of the natural world to be less prone to this kind of thing.
Yeah. So that's basically the end of his little spiel. He didn't have a ton of time to kind of lay out his argument. Oh, by the way, David, I don't think I announced this at the beginning. The topic of their debate is whether or not the biblical God exists, which is a little bit strange that he's even talking about the problem of.
Yeah, this is arguing about. This is either a debate about whether or not God is good, or this is a debate about whether or not the problem of evil is valid. Like those are the two topics that this debate could be about. This has nothing to do with the existence of God, let alone the existence of the biblical God. This is such a weird tactic on all 4 of these individuals' side. I think I'm totally projecting here. I think Alex had a plan I think he thought, and again, this is total mind reading, that Cliff was going to be able to answer a few of these questions. But because Cliff and Stuart couldn't answer any of them, they got stuck here. But I think this was building to a bigger case, and they just never got there. At least that's my hope. I don't know. Maybe this was the plan, and it was just to make Cliff look bad and turn it into a shit show. Who knows? So if that was the goal, then Alex failed. But assuming that wasn't the goal, then Cliff and Stewart failed miserably.
We'll talk about this a little bit later.
Yeah, I
It's
was.
a little bit strange.
Wait, yeah. Matter of fact, in a weird way, that kind of makes his argument less effective because the God of the Bible wouldn't allow suffering. Like, what are you talking
Dude,
about?
okay. Later on, I've got a clip of this. Phil says that the problem of evil is an internal critique, is like an internal problem for Christians. I've had. Oh man, this is gonna trigger me.
I'm glad you brought that up, Cameron, because a thing that Alex said that I didn't catch the first time was that Alex just kind of smuggled in this part of his argument that that animals don't have souls. But it's like, I actually haven't really talked to any Christians that believe that. So is this an actual internal critique or not?
Is it true that Alexes don't have souls? More tonight at 11.
Like, Alex kind of smuggles that in as a way to like support his argument because of his perceived model of Christianity.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's so weird. So weird.
It's also
so
it's also weird. It's also a weird little side note. So the example he gave was the exact same example that I brought up as the most famous example, because that was
not the
William
exact
Rose.
same. It's very close. Very close. Still
That
involves
was,
a deer.
No,
Yeah,
but
so
I do think David, again, has another good point here, which is I think Alex was using the reference material. He was thinking of stuff that he's read in his material, and he's throwing it into Cliff's face, which is why I think, and again, I might be wrong on this, I think Alex was trying to build up to a case, and Cliff and Stewart just weren't intellectual enough or well-read enough to be able to build on these questions that Alex was giving. So I think Alex might have had a devastating takedown ready. He never got to get there. I don't think Phil had shit, but I think Alex might have had a devastating takedown ready for Cliff and Stewart. And if Phil and Alex worked on this together, then they were building on something, and Cliff and Stewart never got there. The other answer here is that Alex's whole point was to humiliate Cliff in the beginning by asking him stuff that he wouldn't know. But this is all stuff he should know. I have a fucking associate's degree and I know this shit. So how is Cliff, who's supposed to have a degree for being able to be a preacher, I'm guessing a DVA or something like that, or at least an MA, not Master of Arts, but MVid. Like he's a pastor. He's gone to seminary. So unless he dropped out, like he should be familiar with this stuff. So I've heard him make speeches on this stuff. You know, I heard Frank Turek make speeches on this stuff. So I don't get this. Oh, he's a preacher. He's not a philosopher. Fuck off. That's so crazy. I'm like, I have an associate's. Okay. I was in school for this over 20 years ago, and I know these arguments like the back of my hand. Alex is just using a word script. Like he's just going through the word track, man. So I don't get this hemming and humming and oh, poor Cliff is just a regular guy who's a preacher. He wouldn't know this. He's a preacher. He's literally teaching the world about Christianity. Of course he has to know this.
You have William Rose. Yeah, he said dies after minutes or something like that.
He said that there's like a lion that comes and bites its neck and stuff. I think in Rose's case, it was like a
forest fire. It was a forest fire.
High schoolers know the trolley problem. High schoolers know the trolley problem, man. The problem of evil is not unique to doctorate level philosophers.
Something like that. Okay, so deer in the woods. But what's interesting about that, so Roe...
There's high schoolers getting... let's not make it high schoolers. There's college kids who are 21 or over, algorithm. There's college kids who are 21 and over who are getting high and drunk right now, having this conversation without any degree in anything whatsoever. I'm talking music majors, I'm talking undecideds, I'm talking future teachers, I'm talking art students who are having this conversation. So don't give me this bullshit that Cliff is some innocent bystander who just wouldn't ever have the access to this conversation. Maybe he doesn't know this one example, the deer suffering alone in the woods, but he should have something. He should have some answer for this.
For everyone who's watching, historically, the argument from evil was presented as a kind of logical problem, that if you have these certain beliefs, you have an internal inconsistency in your thinking. If you believe in an all-powerful, all-knowing, perfectly good being, and you believe that evil and suffering exist, you actually have a contradiction in your thinking. Alvin Plantinga famously destroyed that, and William Rowe took things in an evidential direction, where he's saying it's not that you have a contradiction in your thinking, it's just that evil and suffering of various kinds provide a kind of evidence against the existence of God. So lots of people are familiar with that. Anyone who takes a course in philosophy of religion or something like that, William Rowe's going to come up in there, and you're going to have to read his famous article. But most people don't know William Rowe eventually rejected his own arguments. He actually agreed with the skeptical theists that to make an argument out of that, to say, oh, look at this suffering, I can't think of any reason for a good God to allow this suffering, therefore there probably is no reason, therefore there probably is no God. He said we have smuggled in the assumption that if God had reasons for allowing these kinds of suffering, we would have access to those reasons. And he said, and there's no good reason to assume that. So he, towards the end, took things in a Bayesian direction, like Paul Draper. He offered a Bayesian argument from evil to try and avoid.
I'm sorry, man. I know the big guys that watch my channel really hate David Wood, but I fucking love this guy. Look at the way that he's just shitting on Cameron. And Cameron's just taking it with a grin.
Mistake of his earlier arguments. And so, yeah, guys, it's important to keep in mind that people who've offered these arguments and popularized them sometimes reject their own arguments, and people don't pay attention to their refutation of their own argument, but they still cling to the old argument. Just like you'll still have atheists who cling to the logical argument from evil, even though almost no one at the philosophical level takes that seriously anymore.
I was going to say, Than, you mentioned Bayes. Than is a big Bayes guy. I like it too.
Yeah, if
why
you
don't we
watch
do this
with Bill Hunty, that's
let's do this. So I'm going to go over this argument that I gave in this video, which I honestly think Alex was planning to do a response to it, but then just never got around to it. So he may just not have even watched it. But this is an argument based on a.
Thomas says something interesting here. Cliff's age might be a factor. Sometimes he's not as good at responding in real time. You know, I hate to even say this, but I also had that thought. I was thinking that that might actually be the real reason why his son is helping him out in all of these things. Because otherwise there's really no reason to have his son there. So maybe he's just aging out of it, and he's no longer as good as he used to be, and he wants a little backup, and he wants to train his son so his son can continue after him. Maybe that's it. Maybe he's going to retire soon. But this was the terrible showing for Cliff. I want to be very clear. When I say a terrible showing for Cliff, I don't mean a terrible showing for apologetics. This debate does not destroy apologetics. Does not destroy Christian apologetics. It makes Cliff look like he doesn't know Christian apologetics. There's a lot of answers here that were tee-ups for Christian apologetical answers, which is why I think Alex was trying to lead him down a rabbit trail into a larger trap to take him down, but they just never got there. That's what I think. I don't know that, but I think that's what it was, because, man, these were easy, standard apologetical questions that Cliff could not answer. And Stewart just was in another fucking world, man. I don't even know where he was at. Yeah, it wasn't good. It wasn't good. And Phil was being very standard also. I want to be very clear. Phil was being very basic atheist. Most of Phil's arguments were stuff you can get off a Cracker Jacker box. They weren't bad. Like, he had good, valid points. They just weren't relevant to the question, which is, you're not asking whether or not God is good, which is, Phil seems to be concentrating on the is God good question. Well, that's a different question than does God exist, or does the God of the Bible exist? So I think they either needed to change the the wording of the question to does the God of classical theism exist? And then state underneath it as part of the title, meaning omniscient, omnibenevolent, omnipresent, etc., etc. Or they needed to switch it to the problem of evil or to another question, like, is God good? Or, that kind of thing. But by asking, does God exist, or just the biblical God exist, none of these questions answered that. None of these questions addressed it. None of these questions proved it, and none of these questions disproved it. It was a terrible showing for the topic. But it wasn't a terrible showing for apologists. Like, apologetics are fine. It just shows that Cliff isn't up on his apologetics. And like I said, Stuart was out to lunch. And Alex did fine. Like I said, where he fumbled, it's like, if he was up against Jordan, it might have been a terrible misstep. Against Cliff, didn't even register. Most people who were watching probably didn't even notice that Alex messed up. So, all right, that's it. That's it for tonight, guys. We're going to play some music, and I will talk to you all tomorrow. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. I love you all. If you have families, give them hugs and kisses tonight. If you don't have any family, we got to spend Christmas together at the end of the day. Have a great night. Bye. Oh, shout out to Thomas, B.S. Lewis, Juan Santiago. Who else? If someone else. And Squidward. Have a great night, guys. Bye. Here comes the music.